Washington Journal continues.
And joining us, the president of Judicial Watch is Tom Fitton. He serves as the president, judicialwatch.org, the website, here to talk about issues of the Russia investigation and other topics. Mr. Fitton, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Remind the viewers about the purpose of your organization. Also, if you would, could you tell our viewers how you're funded?
Judicial Watch is funded through voluntary donations from the American people. We're a nonprofit educational foundation that tries to bring more transparency, accountability, and the rule of law to our nation's public life.
So one of those issues of transparency that your organization spends a lot of time with, previous and up to date, is that of this look into the Russia investigation and the background of it. Remind people, I guess because we heard about it a lot, but remind people again, what was essentially your take on what was done in that investigation?
Well, my take is that the Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton campaign were very nervous about the legal issues surrounding Hillary Clinton's emails and, frankly, other misconduct of the Obama administration in 2016, as it related to Hillary Clinton's emails, and then B, as it related to the targeting of President Trump. So they doubled down on it, manufactured false allegations against President Trump to excuse unprecedented spy operations and then later criminal investigations into Trump and his team.
And so as far as all that investigation, what substantially came out of that? I know we saw the Mueller report eventually, but as far as the look into the investigation itself, what conclusive evidence have we found?
Well, just recently we have information that our intelligence community had intelligence that the Russians, evidently listening to Hillary Clinton and company, knew that Hillary Clinton was making it all up or was trying to use these Russia allegations, collusion allegations, that were fanciful to distract the American people from her email allegations. And that was briefed to the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and it was actually referred to the FBI for further investigation, but obviously not much was done with it.
And so as far as the actual release of information, one of the things that people were looking for, particularly if they were following the story, was something called the Durham report and releases from that. What was that report and what was released from it?
Well, Durham hasn't released anything. There have been some disclosures by the Office of Director of National Intelligence and other agencies. To Judicial Watch, for instance, Judicial Watch received some key documents about what was going on. But Durham has had one prosecution/plea deal and not much else.
And so I think the Washington Post reported last week that as far as investigations go, there's still no criminal charges or a public report on this. Why do you think that is?
You'd have to ask the Justice Department. I think it's a real disappointment. Durham was appointed in April of 2019. As far as I'm concerned, there's no excuse for the lack of action. I'm not seeing evidence that he's actually done a serious investigation. Let's say compare and contrast it to Mueller's operation. You saw what a significant D.C. criminal investigation looks like. You have witnesses coming in, you got grand juries operating, all the indicia of a serious criminal investigation none of that being present in the Durham operation.
In most recent days, the president, you probably saw this as well, sent out in a tweet as far as the authorization of a declassification of sorts. Talk a little bit about that tweet, what resulted from it, and what do you expect from it?
Well, he said he was ordering the declassification of everything related to the Russiagate probe and Hillary Clinton's emails as well, which we're very heavily involved in. The Justice Department hasn't done anything. They haven't released anything to us. They told us the tweet has no meaning legally. I don't know whether that's legally right or true, but my question is, why is the Justice Department and the State Department, all of these agencies, continuing to cover up documents? And this is not like required by law. It's usually discretionary, despite the president's wishes to the contrary.
When you say and use the word cover up, then who's behind the cover-up, and are you pointing directly to the president's people appointed by the president to handle these issues?
Well, ultimately, someone like Christopher Wray is responsible. Attorney General Barr is responsible. They know these documents are out there, but they don't have much interest in having them released in a timely way, if at all.
I suppose that you've not the first time I asked this question, but as far as the timing so far out from the Russia investigation, everything behind that, why do you think that matters today?
Well, because, as I call it, the coup is still going on. You still have illegal leaks targeting President Trump of classified information. What took place during the Russia investigation was a crime, in my view. The more we have about it, the more information we have about it, the more accountability there'll be. Certainly, it's not sufficient to get a criminal investigation or prosecution going. But if we don't know what they did, there's going to be zero public pressure or less than public pressure on the Justice Department to hold them accountable. And one of the reasons that Durham has been able to skate without much in the way of having to do anything is because only now are we learning some key aspects about the corruption behind Russiagate.
Such as how?
Well, that Brennan knew and Barack Obama knew specifically that the Russiagate smears were just that, and that they were concocted by the Clinton campaign to target Trump. And we've known that generally, and just in the last few months we have information about, going back to the beginning, that Flynn was knowingly and falsely targeted for prosecution by the Obama administration and then the Mueller operation. We're only hearing about that in the last few months. Did Durham know about this early on? And if not, why didn't he? And if he did, why hasn't he acted on it?
This is Tom Fitton joining us for this discussion. And if you want to ask him questions, you could give us a call. If you want on the phone lines, you can also post on Twitter and our Facebook page as far as our discussion with Tom Fitton. The latest entry into related matters, Tom Fitton, are these series of stories coming out of the New York Post. On its face, what do you think of them?
Well, they confirm that there's significant corruption with the way Biden and his family were operating during his vice presidency, probably before that, that they were trading on his name, trading on his office to line their pockets. That's what the evidence shows. And it shows you why they were, given what went on, we're supposed to forget about impeachment and the coup attack on President Trump earlier in the year. Remember, the president asked a question or two of the Ukrainians about what was going on with Biden and Burisma. And they went crazy, his political opposition. Now we know why they went crazy, because he was onto something, and he was onto something probably even bigger than he knew.
When you say then it confirms, how do you clarify that? How do you qualify that?
Well, the president, Vice President Biden, for instance, admitted to firing or having fired the head, the top prosecutor in Ukraine that coincidentally had been investigating his son's board, Burisma. We have emails coming out, not from computers left by Hunter Biden, but from the State Department, showing that they had longstanding concerns. The email suggests they had longstanding concerns about Biden and Burisma. One top official called it the gift that keeps on giving and complained about the Russians trolling Biden over the Burisma issue. It was a big issue in the State Department. We saw that confirmed in the testimony of during the impeachment. We're seeing it confirmed in documents, and now we're having it filled in, the blanks filled in, as to what monies were being sloshed around in these new Hunter Biden emails, it looks like.
So you probably heard then from the statement you just made that that there were a lot of investigations. Lee called for the removal of that investigator anyway because he was slow walking the process. How do you respond to that?
Oh, those are after the fact rationalizations. How many prosecutors does the Vice President of the United States of foreign countries get involved in firing? It's insane.
So, and to the New York Post story, is there a direct line in your mind from the computer itself to the person who found it to Rudy Giuliani? Is there direct lines then to evidence, or are there still questions as far as the validity of the evidence?
Well, I think the New York Post tried to figure out the chain of custody there, and I would hope the Justice Department and the FBI are doing something about it. I'm concerned they're covering it up and frankly leaking to try to undermine the allegations. But it seems to me a relatively straightforward issue is to figure out whether the emails are legit or not. Namely, we have information that Hunter Biden's lawyer was seeking return of the material, and I haven't seen anything from the Biden campaign to suggest that the emails are not accurate. In fact, they are confirming. There's a Washington Post piece by David Ignatius this weekend where Biden is reported to tell someone how he needed to make money for the family, and then we have Politico being told by the Biden campaign, well, there's no official scheduled meeting between Biden and this Burisma official, but we can't rule out that it didn't happen informally. Oh boy, you know, this is just piling up around Biden, and I suspect it will just get worse and worse.
For its part, the Washington Times this morning has a story taking a look at this issue, and they say in its first paragraph, or at least the first sentence, said Hunter Biden, it was himself that left the laptop computer at a Wilmington, Delaware repair shop, whose owner eventually gave the hard drives and material to the FBI, then later to President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani. That shop owner has, according to the Washington Times, the shop owners told that to a Senate committee.
Yeah, when you confirm that to an official government body, you're putting yourself at legal risk if you're lying. And you know, let's get it all out. I want to hear what Joe Biden has to say about these emails. Did he, for instance, get any money from his brother and his son? Did he get money from them? Where was that money coming from? And we want the details about where Hunter Biden was getting money. As you know, the scandal of the Biden issue is significant, obviously. I'm also concerned about why the Justice Department and the FBI has been sitting on this material for almost a year. What have they been doing? You know, Attorney General Barr, you may remember earlier this year, he said, well, I don't see any evidence about Obama or Biden's involvement in crimes. They're not going to be investigated or, you know, pursued significantly. Well, did he know about the laptop at the time? And if not, why not?
Do you think, what's the likelihood that any other information from the Justice Department, the FBI, or related is going to come up so close to the election day?
Oh, I don't know. We may just get documents in the ordinary course because of the scheduling of our Freedom of Information Act lawsuits and what's required. I'm not sure what comes out between now and then. You know, separately, we may get some documents about Dr. Fauci and his top deputy and their communications about China, WHO, and coronavirus as soon as next week. So we never know what's going to be in the mail the next day.
Tom Fitton, our guest, to talk about these issues with Judicial Watch. Our first call for you comes from New Hampshire. This is Sarah on our independent line. Sarah, you're on with our guest. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. When Donald Trump asked the Russians for help during his campaign while we were fighting the Russians in Syria, I think that should have been enough to open a full investigation on Donald Trump and his minions, and they should have been totally vetted out of the campaign, the race at that time. They would have found out all the ties between Donald Trump's men, his campaign people, between them and Russia, them and Ukraine, and we wouldn't be in this debacle right now with this sociopath running our country into the ground under a Russian coup. This is a Russian coup over our country that Donald Trump and his people are perpetrating against the American people, democracy, and against our Constitution. Then we had Donald Trump shaking down the Ukraine, which is extortion. Donald Trump lying to the American people 20,000 times and not protecting us from COVID-19, 250,000 Americans dead.
Okay, you brought up a couple of topics, so we'll let our guests address that. Mr. Fitton, go ahead.
Well, on the Russian side, that's just a crazed conspiracy theory, not backed up by evidence. President Trump nor any other American knowingly worked with the Russians to interfere in our campaign. That's the conclusion of the Mueller report. That's the conclusion of every indictment that Mueller brought related to the Russian hacking alleged of the DNC and Democrat emails. There's no there. So you're saying a bunch of words that aren't backed up by reality.
From Massachusetts, James is next. Democrats line. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Fitton, I would like to ask you a couple of questions if I could. I know you mentioned shortly that if you testify before Congress and tell a lie, there should be criminal consequences over it. And I'd like to know if you think, well, you brought up Dr. Fauci shortly, do you believe that the 4 times that he went before Congress and swore under sworn testimony that Donald Trump was following all the information he was given, following the science, and doing everything he was told. Do you believe Dr. Fauci should go to jail for that? And one other question I have for you. Lindsey Graham had an interview with IG Horowitz. And if you want, I'd like to tout C-SPAN's archive, if I could. If you go onto C-SPAN's archive, you can find that entire testimony, and there's a picture of Lindsey Graham, and that picture is just above the caption that says, "Please listen to 35 minutes of Lindsey Graham's lies and conspiracy theories." So that's what's going on at C-SPAN and every other news agency in America. Censorship, and they're being carrying the water of Joe Biden like I can't even believe.
Okay, James, we'll let it there. Mr. Fitton, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of Dr. Fauci lying to Congress, so I wasn't quite sure what the question was there. I'm not quite sure what the question is about Inspector General Horowitz. Although, Horowitz's report is worth reading. His reports, I would say, that to me is something everyone ought to be reading if they haven't already, because it really demonstrates the fraudulent nature and criminal nature of the Obamagate/Russiagate attack on our democracy and our republic.
Republican line. This is Donald, Chesapeake, Virginia. Go ahead.
Good morning, C-SPAN.
Good morning.
I'd like to, I have a couple questions about Virginia voting. I mean, there was over 500,000 votes that aren't being counted or something, or there was something wrong with them. I was wondering about that, and I was wondering about the investigation over the last 3 years and how that prosecutors, people, erased all their phones. Is there going to be something come out of that?
Mr. Fitton, it's a good segue, because one of the other issues that Judicial Watch does on an active basis, this idea of mail-in voting and watching over that. Talk a little bit about the work you're involved there, and if you could, relate it to the caller's question.
Well, our concern is, and Judicial Watch has several lawsuits on this issue, is that the rolls aren't clean enough to mail blindly into them, where you have ballots being mailed to people who haven't asked for them, ballot applications being mailed to people who haven't asked for them. In this election cycle, I think it's going to be 100 million total ballot applications will be mailed to people who haven't asked for them. Typically ballot applications or ballots are mailed in most states to people who've asked for them. In some states you have vote by mail generally, but we've had this massive increase in the vote by mail operations, as I said, in a way that I think increases the risk for voter fraud. I think the call is referencing numbers that occurred during the 2020 primary, where you had over 550,000 vote by mail ballots thrown out because of challenges and other problems with the ballots, and that number was above the 319,000 number for the 2016 general election. So the concern is you're going to have potentially millions of people disenfranchised because they relied on mail-in balloting to vote. And if you vote by mail, it's been generally understood your vote is more likely to be challenged, intercepted, lost, or, as I say, thrown out. And my view is you should be voting in person.
Your colleague there at Judicial Watch, Chris Farrell, took a recent look at some of the inconsistencies or problems that have risen in specific areas of the United States. Overall, do you think, if those are true, do you think it's enough to sway an election?
Well, the problem is we don't know, and that's why you want to have a system in place that reassures people that the votes are going to be counted competently and accurately, that only eligible voters are voting. We just announced a study last week that showed in 29 states there are 1.8 million extra names on the rolls, meaning people who you've got more people on the rolls than are living there and eligible to vote. So when you've got dirty lists, it can mean dirty elections. And my concern is that they're going to be counting ballots well after Election Day, not so much because they got a lot of ballots on Election Day, but because some states are counting ballots that arrive after Election Day, which to me, again, invites voter fraud. In California, they'll be counting ballots, according to their rules, for 17 days after the election. That's just absurd. And frankly, even these early voting opportunities for voters, I understand why it may be more convenient to vote on, for weeks before Election Day, but to me, it's at odds with the best way to run an election. And because, for instance, look at the Biden emails, or maybe something Trump's saying on the other side may sway people who otherwise would have voted for him to vote against him.
Oh, go ahead.
And they can't change their vote 2 weeks, 3 weeks out. Once you make your vote and something comes up between that and that time and Election Day that might change your vote, it's too late.
There's a lot of legal teams going to be involved in this process. Does Judicial Watch insert itself that way in any way?
Oh yeah, we're examining and monitoring what's been going on. We sued in California to try to prevent a lawless mail ballot scheme. We ended the suit after they fixed the law and promised that they wouldn't be mailing essentially dead people and people who've moved away. We have 3 active lawsuits to clean up the rolls in North Carolina, Colorado, and Pennsylvania, and those lawsuits will continue past the election. But even our warnings to states have a positive impact. In Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, when we warned them earlier this year or late last year that they had dirty names on the rolls, they immediately removed 69,000 names of people who shouldn't be there.
And just to clarify, is the concern over mail-in voting, the widespread mail-in voting, or is it absentee voting, or is it both?
Well, these days it's a distinction without a difference, because you have votes, so many ballots going to people who haven't asked for them one way or another. Here in the District of Columbia, they just mail the voter registration list, more or less. That's happening in California and Nevada famously as well. And when you have inactive names on the list, they won't necessarily get a ballot, but those names can be used to request ballots, and obviously anyone on that name can show up and vote in person. But when you've got dirty lists, you really shouldn't be mailing blindly into them. It's just is a recipe for fraud and chaos.
With Tom Fitton, we'll hear from Ohio on our independent line. This is Greg. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Fitton.
Morning.
I love all the work you do, and I hope you can dig up some of that Biden crap. As far as this voting stuff you were just talking about, all the people got to do is look at H.R. 1, that first bill that Congress passed. They couldn't get that done, so now they're going to try this mail-in crap. All they're doing is trying to steal the election. The news medias are totally behind this crap. We ain't got to worry about Russia or China. The damn media is going to ruin this country. Other than that, man, I love your work. Keep it up.
Thank you. H.R. 1 was the number one, it's H.R. 1, number one. It was the number one piece of legislation introduced by the new Pelosi House when she took over again. And it incorporates many of the so-called election and voting reforms the left wants, making national ballot harvesting, eliminating essentially voter ID, all sorts of reforms that they're now trying to mandate through litigation. The left opposes voter ID. They oppose us on cleaning up the rolls. They oppose virtually every sensible security regulation related to voting. And in my view, it doesn't make any sense unless they want to be able to steal elections when necessary.
Stephanie's next. Brooklyn, New York. Democrats line. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I'm responding to the Russian investigation. When Barr came in, he turned the report around in the Mueller report, which he lied about. Trump was, his administration was and still is with Russia. Giuliani, his lawyer, who is a crooked lawyer. There's propaganda stuff with Biden's son. It's all a story. Everybody's going to look back when all this is over with about Trump, his children, his daughter Ivanka, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and all that's going on and how much they are stealing from the people, from the working people. We have nothing. The deficit is high, the rich is richer, and the poor is poorer.
So, Stephanie, what specifically would you like our guest to address?
Lying about the Russian investigation. And Mr. Fitton, you are always on Fox News. Fox News is a propaganda organization which tell lies.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you. Mr. Fitton, go ahead.
Well, you know, when I talk about Russia, I try to talk about and refer back to government documents about what went on. So the caller alleges that Barr lied about the Mueller report. He didn't lie about it. So you can read. I encourage your viewers to read Barr's analysis of it and then read the Mueller report. Read the documents that Judicial Watch is getting where, for instance, Bruce Orr, Justice Department official, working with the Clinton campaign's Fusion GPS, and his wife Nellie Orr working with Fusion GPS and having easy access to the Justice Department and FBI. Bruce Orr telling everybody, look, these guys have it in for Trump. But here's the information, but you should know that. And looking at the federal court rulings in the FISA court, highlighting the illegal FISA warrants being used to spy on the Trump team through Carter Page. All these are government documents, and we're going to look back on this and see what I think President Trump correctly terms as the biggest corruption scandal in American history. And I fear what's going to happen next if this gang that pursued Trump so illegally and abused the powers entrusted to them by the American people are able to get away with it. I think it will just get worse.
West Virginia, this is Brian, Republican line. You're next up. Hi.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Tom. I'd like to commend you on the work that you do, and I know sometimes you probably get really disgusted because you seem like you're just banging your head against the wall. My point I'd like to get to is, you know, a lot of times when President Trump appoints these people, you know, Bill Barr, John Durham, whoever takes these investigations over, it just seems like they rev up and they get into it, and then they just start backpedaling, and they lose momentum, they change their minds. You know, I often wonder if sometimes that they're not influenced. You know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but they get their obituaries read to them from a group of people, and then they start backing off. And with the deep state going deep, you know, there's Democrats that are really deep in this corruption, and I'm almost certain that there's probably Republicans that are deep into this corruption too. Do you think sometimes that President Trump's own party has a hand in some of this? We all know the Democrats do. You know, they've never ever peacefully transitioned this change of power over. But do you honestly think that there are actually some Republicans that are just trying to stonewall a lot of this information too?
Caller, thanks. Caller, thank you.
Well, that's literally true in terms of the head of agencies that have withheld information from Judicial Watch and stonewalled the release of information. It's also literally true with John McCain and his top people pushing around this fake dossier against President Trump. You know, my concern on the Republican side is that the president's been virtually alone in defending himself. Yes, I know there have been members of the Senate and the House who've tried to expose what went on, like Devin Nunes and Devin Archer and Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson and Lindsey Graham to a certain extent. But the leadership's largely been AWOL in the face of this massive corruption. It's been intolerable, the lack of concern by both establishments of both parties about the criminal victimization of President Trump and others.
From Mary Elizabeth in New York, Democrats line. Hi.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
How is everyone? I've been listening to Mr. Fitton, and it's very discouraging because I remember Judicial Watch chasing after Hillary Clinton and the Clintons and all this other propaganda business, because we need to have an informed electorate. The people who know American history, who we have regard for our morals and for our institutions, and the fact that we're about perfecting ourselves to make a more perfect union. And everyone is entitled to their beliefs, but everyone is not entitled to inordinate facts. Mr. Mueller's report outlined the fact that the president could have been indicted for obstruction of justice, but he could not because he's a standing president, and there's this Justice Department memoranda that says you cannot indict or cite a sitting president. And he said in his campaign, Russia, are you listening? And Mr. Manafort's relationships with the Russian intelligence officer that has been exposed, the same people in the Ukraine that have been exposed as being Russian intelligence agents of the Russian intelligence.
So, caller, again, what would you like our guests specifically to address out of those things?
I would like Mr. Fitton to be honest, to be for America, and to be for the proponents of our democracy and our democratic institutions, and not cite Russian intelligence for the morass in which we are living.
Okay, caller, we'll leave it there. We'll let our guests respond to what you brought.
It's just amazing that so many on the left, and I appreciate the caller is just following up on really conspiracies being put out by the left now to diminish the Biden corruption scandal and what went on during the Obama administration in terms of their abuse of power. Just for buying into this abuse of power that used the CIA, the FBI, the Defense Department, the State Department, the White House to abuse a political opponent. I'm concerned about the country. I'm concerned that we have this casual corruption here in Washington, D.C., and if they don't like you, the rules don't apply. They'll come after you. They'll try to jail you. They'll make up material and leak it about you. They'll break the laws that try to protect our nation's national security and leaking classified information. When you leak classified information improperly, you are placing American lives and others at risk. And that's been almost the modus operandi on a weekly basis out of this deep state. And we've got to be concerned about it because our country is being put at risk by this attack on, as I say, our Republican form of government, where the rule of law doesn't matter if you're of the wrong political stripe.
Mr. Fitton, one more topic to address as we let our callers talk to as well, that of the confirmation process for Amy Coney Barrett. What was the takeaway last week from what you heard?
Oh, she hit it out of the park. She, in a wonderful way, educated millions of Americans about the conservative approach to constitutional law, that we don't want to make it up as we go along. We don't want judges to make it up as they go along. We want them to follow the text as best understood by those who wrote the law, rather than change the law with times based on their political preferences, judges' political preferences. We don't want politicians in robes. And we're going to have a new Supreme Court justice, and she's going to be an excellent addition to the court. And I encourage your listeners to call their senators to let them know what they think about this confirmation. And she is about the best type of nominee that I've seen in my 20-plus years at Judicial Watch.
So one of the things that spun out from the confirmation process was this idea of expanding the Supreme Court, and one of the people talking about that yesterday was from the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Delaware Senator, Democrat Chris Coons. I want to play you a little bit of what he had to say about that topic, get your response to it.
If Barrett is confirmed and Democrats win back the Senate, would you vote to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court if it came up for a vote? Is that something you'd be in favor of?
Well, Jake, like Joe Biden, I'm not a fan of expanding the court, but we have a few weeks here to see whether there are 4 Republicans who will step back from this precipice. It is President Trump who has pressed for this nominee so he can have a key vote to overturn the Affordable Care Act in the middle of a pandemic. It is the Republican majority that's responsible for racing forward with this extreme, unqualified nominee, unqualified because of her extreme judicial philosophy. And that's who should be bearing the brunt at the ballot box in this election, that they're doing this to get someone on the court just in time, a week after the election, to take away critical health care protections from a majority of Americans. We need to focus on that.
So you oppose.
And then if we happen to be in the fact pattern where we have a President Biden, we'll have to look at what the right steps are to rebalance our federal judiciary.
So your mind is open about adding justices to the Supreme Court, yes or no? Just your mind is open?
Yes.
So with that, do you think it's a possibility, or at least a realistic possibility?
Oh, sure. The left is committed to adding justices to the Supreme Court in a way that would undermine the court's independence under our Constitution, its separation of powers in our constitutional system. It's a radical assault on the judicial branch. It's never been done before, at least since 150 years. And look, you know, in the Ninth Circuit, I think there are nearly 50 justices or judges on the court. Is that what we're going to have in the Supreme Court? Maybe we'll just have 435 members of the Supreme Court. That's why some folks that's why Justice Bader Ginsburg opposed it. That's why everyone on both sides of the aisle have long opposed this, what now is a revolutionary concept. Once you start adding members to the court, it's not just limited to your side, leftists. Republicans are going to come in and they're going to, quote, rebalance the court. Where does it end? Where does it end?
From Glenda in Minnesota, independent line, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Go ahead.
Hi. I can't get excited about sons making profit off of their father's position, with Donald Trump Jr. making $100,000 of speaking at different functions. I mean, it's absurd. We have McConnell's wife who is making money off of transportation, and she's the head of transportation. So anyway, talk about abuse. We've heard about Obama's travel and golf for 8 years. You guys never let up on it. And one thing about Trump is he's going to be with us forever. And he's going to be charging his Secret Service for their rooms and golf carts even when he's long gone. Please explain to us how much it has cost us out here for Trump golfing and traveling.
Mr. Fitton, if you wish, go ahead.
It costs money. It costs money to move the president around. We've been looking at those numbers. We've released them in the past. The media has hyper-focused on the numbers. When we were examining Obama, we were the only ones doing it. Now that Trump's coming in, the left media that hates him have really done all the work examining Trump's numbers. In ways detailed ways that we didn't even bother with Obama, and holding Trump to a standard that we didn't hold Obama to. So it's really just laughable to hear a complaint about, and I don't know if it's true or not, Donald Trump Jr. making $100,000 for a speech, where you had, when the vice president was vice president, we now have a Senate report showing that Hunter Biden got $3.5 million from a shady Russian interest. And secondly, we have new documents. These new emails suggest that he was funneling the money to his father. And I don't know if that's true, but that's what the emails suggest, and that needs to be uncovered or confirmed one way or another, because that's crisis-level corruption. That's crisis-level corruption about what Joe Biden's been implicated in these Hunter Biden emails.
This is Jeff. Jeff's in Miles, Texas, Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
You're on, sir. Go ahead.
Tom, can you explain why we haven't had a declassification of the report from the FISA court, Judge Collier, in 2017 about the unauthorized searches using the 702 database with NSA? That was kind of reconfirmed in the 2019 declassified report by Judge Blockberg. And can you also kind of explain a little bit about the two rule for the Carter Page FISA warrant that allowed him to search in the Title I FISA?
I'm not sure I know about the document you're referencing in the first case. In the second one, you know, I'm generally aware of the two-hop rule and that, but I don't know enough to comment on it fairly here.
So there was another player in this process a couple weeks ago, a release of information from the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. What did he release, and of what he released, how much of it was valid?
Are you talking about the Brennan and the Hillary Clinton related releases?
Correct, yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so there were three pieces of, I guess, intelligence information, or three pieces of information. They learned early on in July that the Russians had information that Hillary Clinton had come up with this scheme suggested by an advisor, a foreign policy advisor, to raise the issue of Russia collusion and conspiracy with the Russians, distract from her emails. And then that was elevated to the President of the United States briefing by John Brennan. Brennan confirmed that, it seems. And also, the CIA referred it to the FBI later in the year as well. So really, to me, pretty extraordinary endorsements all around of the validity of the information. And it certainly fits in with what's been my theory of the case. And it's been obvious that they wanted to distract from their own criminality by making up garbage about President Trump. And it worked in many ways, in a sense that the Justice Department's largely been frozen ever since, and that Hillary Clinton and Obama and all the rest have not been subject, in my view, to serious criminal or any other investigation by this Justice Department, even when they appointed someone specifically to look into it, like Durham.
So with the DNI's release, though, did he clarify as far as not knowing the validity or the accuracy of the information he was about to release, or the sourcing where it came from?
Well, I think subsequent material have suggested that it was accurate and valid. You know, there's going to be a battle over what additional information can be released, but there's little doubt that the CIA considered it significant enough that they wanted the FBI to follow up on it.
One more call for our guest, Nicholas in Pennsylvania, Dallastown, Democrats line. Nicholas, good morning.
Yes, thank you, C-SPAN, for taking my call. First, I'm surprised you have this guest on here. I don't understand what qualification he has just to say whatever he wants without any evidence. As far as the Mueller report is concerned, it did find Donald Trump and his campaign guilty, okay, of misleading the investigation. Also, he sits here and says he doesn't understand why our Justice Department doesn't accept a tweet from Donald Trump about releasing classified documentation. That has come through documents addressed to the departments in order to release that information, not through a tweet as a legal document.
So what's your question specifically for our guest?
What is his qualifications? Again, I'm surprised you have this guest on here. Do you have any talking head on here without any qualifications?
Look,
make accusations without no evidence.
Mr. Fitton, go ahead.
Again, I rely on government documents to talk about these issues. You don't want to look at the government documents. You question my qualifications. I've been running Judicial Watch for almost 20 years now, or over 20 years. So the idea that you can just personally attack someone as a means to distract from the facts that I'm bringing out there. You know, I'm talking about documents that Judicial Watch has uncovered through the Freedom of Information Act. These are documents from the Justice Department, the FBI, the State Department. You have Joe Biden refusing to deny, and it's easy to do, that those emails were inaccurate. And for instance, he didn't get any money from his son. I'm waiting for that to happen. I'm still waiting for a criminal investigation of what I believe to be criminal activity. What's wrong with asking for that? Look, you know, President Trump was impeached and targeted with unprecedented spying and criminal harassment by prosecutors in the Justice Department, naming Mueller, over much, much less than what we're seeing now about Vice President Biden.
Mr. Fitton, you have a book coming out in the next couple of days, A Republic Under Assault. What's the topic?
Well, it's what we're talking about. We have this unprecedented coup attack against the President of the United States and our ability to govern ourselves. your listeners, both left and right, have to ask yourselves, who do you think decides you should be president? Should your vote be negated by people here in D.C. who think they know better one way or another? Right now it's Trump. Tomorrow could be a different president. But we have a right to govern ourselves. And when we have these agencies run by career staff or temporary political appointees who aren't subject to the sort of scrutiny that they should be, just deciding on their own based on political decisions to target someone because they don't like their philosophy or their governance, that's a coup. And our republic has been under assault in that regard in ways never seen before in American history.
Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, judicialwatch.org, if you want to check out the website and its work. Mr. Fitton, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome.
Joining us next, we'll be joined by Guy Cecil. He's the chairman of Priorities USA, billed as the largest Democratic super PAC supporting the Biden campaign. We'll talk about the campaign and the state of campaign 2020 when we return.